You've probably heard the word sequestration used recently, the process by which spending reductions are planned to be made. $1.2 trillion, as a matter of fact, over the next 10 years, with $110 billion being made the first year. And that money is split evenly from defense and domestic programs. Now, the defense cuts have brought about a whole lot of people coming out to warn about the impending doom and gloom that could be brought about. They talk about compromising the security of our country and the lives of our military. But it turns out the exorbitant amount of military money is spent on a whole lot of other things not really being talked about. So we want to tell you all about them. Here's something you might be shocked to learn. The firm formerly known as Blackwater, now Academy LLC, will be paying a $7.5 million fine. That's on top of its already $42 million settlement it reached regarding civil arms export violations. They recently admitted to wrongdoing in connection to 17 federal criminal charges. So, a cut to the company's profits then? Actually, no. The funds they'll use to pay off those fines will come from already existing contracts with the Pentagon. So it seems to be an act of accountability boils down to a continued revolving door between defense contractors and the government. All as we continue to hear how terrible it is to cut any money from the Pentagon. I do want to talk more about this with retired U.S. Army Colonel Douglas Macgregor, Executive Vice President of the Burke Macgregor Group. And Colonel Macgregor, let's begin with this information that's come out about Blackwater or Academy or whatever its name is these days. This is a company notorious for playing by its own rules and yet never seeming to be held accountable. So I guess I'm wondering what role you think this current situation, this incident has in the current discussion that we've been having about sequestration.
Well, in the context of sequestration, it's meaningless. This contractor does what it does because the federal government wants it to. That's what people need to keep in mind. We hire people like Academy to do the things that the federal government either cannot do or would rather not do. So when we talk about wrongdoing, I suspect that if you follow the trail, you will find someone in the federal establishment who has his hands in the wrongdoing. That at some point, somebody said it would be helpful if you did X. The fact that X was illegal is probably irrelevant to the contractor who says, look, I'm being paid to do what this government official tells me he wants to do.
But why aren't more lawmakers coming forward, or members of the media for that matter, and saying, hey, why don't we go through and have the DOD say, this is what money can go for and this is what it can't?
Well, first of all, the key operative word here is money. Everything is about money, where it goes, who makes it. All of the contractors contribute to people's re-election campaign funds. So members of the Senate in particular, to a lesser extent the House, although it goes on there, are very interested in sustaining this gravy train called the defense budget. Not for reasons that they say publicly, but because it involves money. Remember, people investing in the Defense Department have enjoyed enormous profits over the last 10 years. The defense establishment itself is part of it, but it's really these defense contractors, the industries, they're making a profit margin or have a profit margin of about 30 to 35%. At this point, everyone knows the defense budget is going to be cut. So this is a last desperate effort to secure as much cash as possible from the existing budget before everything tanks. And remember, a 30 to 35% profit margin is enormous. They're going to be driven back to about 15 to 20% profit margins, which is certainly much more reasonable given the work they do for the American people. But that's next year and the year beyond that.
I mean, I guess let's talk specifically about sequestration itself. We've heard the word devastating used by Secretary of State Leon Panetta. We've heard manufacturers come out and talk about the tens of thousands of jobs that will be lost. Talk about the real winners and losers in these defense cuts.
Well, first of all, we know, for instance, with Lockheed Martin, that it made more money after it reduced its workforce in 2007. The predisposition in the defense industries is not very different from any private industry in this country right now. You cut the workforce in order to maintain your profit margins.
Or even grow your profit margins, it seems.
Exactly. And then in the Defense Department, when you look at the armed forces, you shed soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines who could actually deploy and fight in favor of maintaining the overhead of generals and admirals. And that ratio is, by the way, higher today than it's ever been. And during World War II, we had roughly one Army general for every 6,000 troops. Today, we have one Army general for every 1,500 troops.
Oh, wow.
So you're talking about an enormous overhead that the Cold War created, and that Cold War overhead has actually grown over the last 10 years. So we have this enormous number of single service headquarters inside the armed forces, as well as various joint task forces. All of this, they will work to protect. Before anything else, they will cut the soldiers who deploy and fight. That's the tragedy. A
number of policy changes, of course, to be talked about, but we can't talk about this without also talking about the politics. I know the Obama administration, of course, very concerned. They thought that this, was a last-ditch bill in order to keep lawmakers accountable. And yet it looks like it could happen, and it could happen. Even though both Republicans and Democrats voted for this, we should mention, it's going to happen. The vote, at least, was on Obama's watch. So he's nervous. But then this is really interesting because you have Republicans who, the two things that they're loyal to, low taxes and the Defense Department, possibly having to make a choice. And I want to play a really quick part of an exchange that happened recently. This was a panel of defense contractors a few weeks ago here on Capitol Hill.
The specific question I asked was who here would advise the Congress to rule out, under all circumstances, any revenue increase on anyone at any time? Would any of you make that recommendation to us?
I think everything has got to be on the table at this point. Now, this is not, this is a personal opinion. I'm not speaking for the employees of United Technologies or for UTC.
So here you have, a Democratic congressman saying, do you think this is advisable? And even the defense contractors saying nothing's off the table. That includes raising taxes.
Well, I wouldn't hold my breath while I waited for that to happen. You don't, first of all, raising taxes does not offset declining revenues. If you raise taxes, whatever hope there is, and I don't see very much right now in terms of coming out of the current recession, I think things over the next 2 years are going to get much, much worse. And the only way to survive this is to dramatically cut federal spending. So the point is, we're going to cut the defense budget long before we go after Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. And even under sequestration, there's about a 2% reduction in Medicaid, for instance. But generally speaking, Medicare and Social Security are largely untouched. But they, too, inevitably will end up on the table. The point is, you can't save us from the fiscal disaster that lies on the horizon by raising taxes. Revenue is declining. It's not going to increase. So I think it's kind of a dead issue. It's not worth discussing.
Another thing that is worth discussing, though, is other aspects of this defense budget. It's not just, fueling the funds into contractors like Blackwater Academy. Sure. There's also a lot of programs. If you look across the country of Iraq right now, there are empty, abandoned prisons that were supposed to hold, 3,000 prisoners. You have abandoned hospitals, things that were built with money never used. You have programs like the Iraqi prison program. It came out recently. Iraqis don't even want, the Iraqi police program. So talk a little bit about, other useless ways in which this money is spent.
Look, the American people have been led for the last 10 years by, well, I would say actually for the last 20, by administrations who insisted that they could transform non-Americans, primarily in the Third World and the Balkans, into Anglo-Saxon Democrats. It's a lot of nonsense. It's a miserable failure. It's an open secret. Why would they do this? Well, some of it is utopianism that we do suffer from inside the Beltway, but a lot of it, again, goes back to money. Who had the contracts? Where did the money go? Who made money as a result? I mean, we could talk about Halliburton and a whole range of firms that have profited enormously. Again, there is no accountability in the city. When's the last time we held general officers accountable for the fact that Iraq today is an Iranian satellite? We said we were going in to transform it into this Anglo-Saxon democracy that would ultimately be friendly to the West and friendly to the United States. And today, Iraq is effectively an Iranian client state. Who are we kidding? This is part of a much larger problem. And money that we've spent has simply been squandered and lost.
All right. Certainly so much to talk about. I think you have a really good point there. U.S. Army Colonel Douglas Macgregor, Executive Vice President of the Burke-McGregor Group.